Thank you for coming today. My name is Alyssa Muraoka, and I'm currently in Charleston, South Carolina, getting my PharmD from the Medical University of South Carolina and my MBA from the Citadel. So I wanted to start off by explaining what the Fireside Chat series is. This started off as a spin-off of Beju and Justin, who was our guest speaker today's virtual pharmacy happy hour, and we wanted to bring students and anyone else interested together with some guest pharmacists to talk about jobs in pharmacy we aren't typically exposed to. So with the help of the Pharmacy Informatics Academy, we have some co-founders here today. We started the series to bring awareness to non-traditional pharmacy careers to as many people as possible. We plan to have a few more of these webinars, so keep your eye out. I think the next one's in about 3 weeks. And what I like to do at this time is to take a few minutes to see where everyone is joining us from. So if you'd like to just put in the chat what state or country that you are in right now. Maryland.
Look at all those DMV folks repping. Hello.
Massachusetts, nice.
It's actually a nice day up here in Mass.
Okay. So today we have Dr. Justin Bioc here to talk about many different things, ranging from managed care to virtual Appies and networking in a virtual space. So our agenda is I'll ask him a few background questions for about 15 minutes. Then we have a few questions that you all submitted in the sign up. And then with the rest of our time, we'll open it up to any questions that you may have. So just put those in the chat, and then we'll be calling on you at the end of our webinar. But there's a disclaimer that we are recording this, and we will be asking you to come on screen or unmute yourself to ask your questions directly to Justin. We are also trying something different today to help everyone increase their LinkedIn presence and to spread the word about the Fireside Chat series. So Beju, if you want to pull up that graphic. To do this, while you're listening to our presentation, just jot down a few takeaway points you may have, whether it's something you've learned or thought was interesting. And then at the end of our talk, you can create a little post on LinkedIn. Are you able to pull that up, Beju?
Yep, I'm sorry, we're working on it.
And then we'll share it at the end as well. Or we can come back to it. Awesome. Okay. So this is just to help guide you in making a post on LinkedIn. So everyone, if you don't have a LinkedIn, set up a LinkedIn and create a post with your takeaways, so like bullet point form. And then tag me, Justin, Pharmacy Informatics Academy, and then with the cute hashtag, catching Phia. Okay. So let's get started. Justin is a clinical pharmacist at Devoted Health. Would you just take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to the position that you are in today?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks, Alyssa, for having me, and to the Pharmacy Informatics Academy for getting this group together so we could spend time learning more about pharmacy. So as Alyssa said, I'm clinical pharmacist, head of pharmacy at Devoted Health. But before I got here, I actually started out kind of where I think most people start out. I actually started out in retail. My retail experience is a little bit unique. Out of school, I managed 4 independent pharmacies that were largely serving Medicaid populations in federal qualified health centers and in community hospitals here in the Boston area. After that, I realized that I couldn't build the clinical programs that I always wanted to do. So I tried to get into managed care, and I was lucky enough to get into a local regional health plan here called Tufts Health Plan. Where I did utilization management, largely processing prior authorizations, but I also did a lot of pharmacist engagement. Teaching was something that I was always passionate about, and I kind of made it my job when I was there. And then I just serendipitously landed at Devoted. I was looking for a new opportunity, and Devoted had a spot for its first ever pharmacist, and so I jumped in. And I've been there since October of 2018, and helped build the pharmacy program from the ground up. So that's a high level overview.
Thank you. And do you want to just explain real quick what managed care is and a typical week in the life of a managed care pharmacist?
Yeah, the way I like to think of managed care is it's all about equity and equality, I guess, in a way. We have a set number of dollars to take care of a set number of people, and we need to find a way to spread those dollars out so that everyone can get a piece of the healthcare system. That's, I would say, a high level overview of what managed care looks like. Yeah, it has different flavors depending on where you're practicing, because managed care could be from the lens of an insurer, it could be from the lens of a hospital system, it could be from the lens of an integrated delivery system. So it really depends. At the end of the day, though, it's how do I spread out the money so that everyone gets high quality care? That's what we care about. And then I guess a week in my life, it varies a lot. I mostly run our clinical programs related to our quality metrics. So I could be doing anything from actually calling some of our members to help them out with their clinical situations, trying to close some of their healthcare gaps. Most of the time, I'm helping our team and leading my team of pharmacists and technicians to ensure that we're able to deliver these interventions at scale. Sometimes I'm in meetings trying to find different vendors to help us out with this work. Other times I'm helping our clinical leadership strategize how we should move forward, ways that we can really impact our members. Devoted is a very high touch company, and we love to delight our members. During this COVID time, we invested a lot in ensuring that our members had some sense of normalcy, and so we're ensuring that we're continuing to deliver the high level of care without stepping on their primary care physicians or their specialists' toes. Along with that is a lot of admin tasks, crunching data, helping providers understand the data that we give them, answering to our PBM, performing oversight over the PBM, and that can look like anything from doing audits to actually, combing through some of the details and workflows, ensuring that we're compliant, writing policies and procedures, kind of like the boring stuff that comes with being an administrator.
That's awesome. Going off of how COVID has kind of changed things, do you want to just touch on how it's changed managed care, or how have you seen it changed your job, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's causing the industry to accelerate some of its innovation. Telehealth is now a paid for service, which it wasn't before. And I think our regulators have had to come together relatively quickly to figure out whether or not they can pay for these services and how they're going to treat those kinds of visits, how we're going to use remote delivery of healthcare, whether it be telephonic, via telehealth, or through other means, like how that counts. Because really, at the end of the day, like, it has to count for something. You can't just say that you saw someone on video or you talked to someone on the phone and nothing happened. It's also drumming up different kinds of issues that you wouldn't normally see in a world where you can see other people face to face. Some of the things that I think we're dealing with in our patient population is loneliness, and trying to find interventions to basically treat quote unquote loneliness is actually quite difficult, right? Because I don't think most people are trained to do that. And loneliness is not typically something you think of healthcare as solving. Another thing that is somewhat difficult here is just basic needs. Out of COVID, I think we saw a lot of people experience food insecurity, financial insecurity. Those are some of the things that, as a health payer, you don't normally take care of. But at Devoted in particular, we were really invested in trying to find a holistic means to address our members' needs. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to care to hear from you about starting a DMARD for their rheumatoid arthritis or starting a statin because it helps them prevent get a heart attack, when at the end of the day, they're just hungry and they just want to know how to get groceries to their house. You know, I think maybe these aren't things that people think about. You know, you saw some people in the industry just say, oh, we're going to waive copays. Everything's going to be free. COVID testing free. You know, that's great and all, but like I said, people don't care when their basic needs are not met. Healthcare is the last thing they care about.
That makes so much sense. And I like how you said that the situation kind of made the industry speed up a little bit in adapting certain technologies. And going off of that, you recently helped to create some virtual Appies. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what that looks like, or what that would look like for students?
Yeah, it was like really interesting timing because I was just launching my Appy at the time, and I was like so ready to have students on board. I had a whole onboarding plan, people to train face to face, and then COVID hit, and I was like, damn. What do I do now? So I quickly just pivoted to make it remote, and it works out because we did a lot of great planning with kind of like disaster preparedness. Like our whole company was able to flip to fully remote at the drop of a dime. We didn't have to reinvest a whole bunch of dollars into building remote infrastructure. We kind of already had the baseline in place. So it was basically just learning a new type of onboarding for interns, right? You know, getting them the right kind of permissions, making sure they understand how to interact with patients in a virtual way, having them manage their time where you can't actually see them. I think, you know, the idea of supervision without ever seeing your preceptor actually breathing down your back is a little bit different. And so we still needed a way to keep, you know, think about how students can engage with us in a completely remote environment. For our company, like I said, that was a pretty easy step. Like culturally, we're all ready for remote work. We're already ready for engagement with a distributed team. So it was just a matter of fitting them into that puzzle.
Do you do a lot of like Zoom calls then? Or I mean, is it structured to have that within the program?
Yeah, it's interesting because like my team already meets a lot. We do a lot of virtual check-ins. You know, like we say good morning to each other every day, and we say whenever we're leaving. We tell each other when we're going to lunch. We actually meet 3 times a week. We also have biweekly one-on-ones. So we actually meet a lot, and we were already meeting a lot before we went remote. I think that's just part of the engagement strategy that we had prior to all of COVID hitting. And so, you know, retrofitting it, I don't think anything has actually changed for us. And that's probably a good thing, right? Because if you already had a system that worked and you didn't have to change anything, then it's just going to continue to work as planned.
Right. We got a question when people are signing up. How could students build solid relationships with preceptors during virtual rotations? And to tie in with how to network and make an impactful connection virtually.
Yeah, I would say one thing is like to actually talk to your preceptor. You know, like this even when Appies were in person and I was in pharmacy school, you definitely had those students who were just like, oh, this is just like another class. Like I'm the student and my preceptor is the teacher. But Appies really aren't like that, and you shouldn't treat them like that. They're really an opportunity for you to start practicing the way you intend to practice once you graduate. And that includes networking. Like I think being part of a healthcare team in the both micro and macro sense is all about engagement. You know, if you want to be the student for the rest of your life and like kind of hope that someone will come to you and push you to do something, then you're always going to stay in that spot. If you're going to kind of take initiative and talk to your preceptor or learn about different parts of managed care on your own and bring that back, you know, then you're already ahead of the game. You know, one question you should always be asking yourself is like, how am I going to deliver value to someone or something or to an organization? And that's really how you build strong networking relationships. Like, you know, you can say hello, you can smile, and you can ask someone for something that actually didn't give anyone any value, and you've kind of just been archived in the back of someone's mind. But if you can walk up to someone and be like, hey, I'm, you know, like, this is what I'm interested in and this is what I'm pursuing. I'm doing this project and I think it kind of like fits into what you're doing. Can we work together on this? You know, that there's value there, right? You're working on something that provides me information that I need. that's really all it is. And so you might have to spend time reflecting on what your value prop is. Um, and that in and of itself is like maybe a little bit difficult, but it's totally worth it. Like if your goal is to like make connections that make sense for you in your career, or maybe just in your life, for me, I'm at the point in my career where like I just like to talk to people and I just want to learn more about folks, and a lot of people just like my value sometimes is just my energy. That's great. I know that about myself, and people who don't want that can kind of like not be part of my inner circle for now.
And that also ties in with your virtual pharmacy happy hour that you and Beiju started. Could you tell us why, the reason behind starting that, and any benefits you see from it?
Yeah, I would say there wasn't really a reason to start it. Beiju and I are part of like a Slack community started by a pharmacist in the Northwest. It's the pharmacist Slack group, and Beiju just reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, what do you think about doing this?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" like I think it worked out because like I said earlier, like my whole thing with networking is just to meet people and to share my energy, and that's enough for me. And that's how I think Happy Hour was born. And maybe Beiju had like a different intention, and hopefully that's coming to fruition for him. But yeah, there's our page built by Beiju. He's definitely more of the mechanics behind this than I am. I feel like I'm more of just a face and a voice to the whole happy hour thing. But I think it's paying dividends, honestly. For me, like I've met a lot of people and I've learned a lot about the pharmacist experience and kind of like whose dots need to connect to make what happen. And each happy hour has delivered something unique. The past happy hour we had this Friday, we made a lot of connections that could lead to potential jobs, which is, we never planned for that. Cough, cough, find your seat. But, that was a surprise. I think before that, we had a discussion about COVID, and kind of like all of the different technological advances that have been working towards controlling things like COVID. And I always think of Jing, for example, who has that, geospatial tool that helps companies figure out where to put critical services that are geographically make sense. So yeah, it's just fascinating. The things you learn and the people you meet, I don't think you would ever get to see them outside of that forum.
Yeah, I think it's really cool as a student. I've been in a few of these already, and y'all should think about joining them on their next one in 2 weeks. Every other Friday is when they hold it. And the reason why we're here today is also thanks to Justin and Beiju. And then I have one more question before we open it up to everyone. And this was another one submitted when people were registering. Transitioning from a hospital pharmacy role to a managed care, how do you suggest someone makes that transition? And we had some questions about residencies. Do you think that's necessary? Because I know you didn't do a residency to get to where you are today.
Yeah, I have very non-traditional path, I think. And so maybe this will bring some weight to my suggestions, but like I didn't get a residency. I applied, and I also scrambled and just like never got past initial interviews. I also went to try to get my MBA, and then I dropped out after a quarter. And so I never finished it. But to put that into context, like I now lead a team at one of the most innovative companies in healthcare. And so that is to say that you don't need those things. You need to figure out how you're going to deliver value, and that happens at all levels of your career, particularly when you're transitioning. When you're transitioning, you've built up a bunch of skills that may or may not be relevant to your next role. But chances are that, going from hospital to managed care is not a huge jump, right? You have an understanding of the healthcare system. You have an understanding of the clinical needs of patients. You probably have a good set of soft skills, or I hope that you're developing soft skills on like how to talk to providers, how to get pull with your administrators, particularly in the political realm of hospital pharmacy. So these are really important. Residency and kind of extra degrees and certifications, and I'm dual board certified, those don't really mean anything unless you can demonstrate that they add value to your role, and that's what you need to prove, particularly when you're transitioning. That isn't to say like that it may not be needed. Maybe it's just a hard requirement. But I can tell you, in all my years of working in managed care, none of the pharmacists that I've hired, the first two that I hired, no residency training. I don't have residency training, no advanced degrees outside of our PharmD. At my last job, at another health plan, nobody was residency trained. And they have all been in managed care for quite a while. And it was a 5-star health plan, meaning that they could basically enroll as many members as they wanted and provide really rich benefits because they got a lot of extra money. So this isn't to say that residency or pursuing secondary education isn't valuable if it's going to help you demonstrate what your value is, but you can still do that without those things. Like, those are really just tools in the toolkit. They're not something that you can lean on and say that, like, you need to hire me and I'm legit because I have something that others don't.
Mm-hmm. So I lied. I have one more question that I wanted to ask. So everyone listening to Justin speak today, if you have questions that you want to ask him specifically, just drop them in the chat. And then after I ask him this last one, then we'll move on to your questions. So will there be a growing use of HEOR, health economics outcomes research, in managed care practice? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. I think it really depends on whether or not those outcomes matter to the stakeholders. When you look at smaller organizations who have even a smaller number of dollars and are trying to make clinical decisions for its patient population, and like movements of like a penny per member per month or 2 pennies per member per month, really matter, then I think HEOR has a role. When you're talking about larger companies who really need to save fast money, I think volume-based decisions still are the golden standard. If you can drive a lot of volume, which means that you can drive a heavy discount, you'll get the most savings that way, rather than investing a ton of money into kind of like a value-based framework that requires a lot of staffing, requires a lot of data, requires a lot of negotiation. And so that's my personal opinion. I think you'll get a different flavor of that opinion from any person that you ask, particularly in managed care. But it also depends on like what lens you're taking. If you look at diseases that have a treatment landscape where the drugs deliver very different value propositions, then yeah, HEOR can really demonstrate that. In spaces where it's basically homogeneous and discounts are what's gonna drive your ultimate treatment strategy, then yeah, not so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Anyone have any questions? If not, I can always go back to the pre-registration questions, but you can take this time to talk to Justin and ask a question one-on-one and make a connection. Wink, wink. Okay. If you guys have any questions, just drop them in the chat. And then for now, I'll just go back to some other questions that we collected. Let's see. How can we find a list of pharmacies and work online, like remote pharmacies? Do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely just searching, like search often and cast a wide net if, remote is your main motivation for finding a job like that. Particularly if you're trying to get into managed care, remote positions are largely open in the utilization management space. And those positions usually are starting to fill now through the beginning of AEP. When you think about utilization management volume and the volume of work, it usually has something to do around the time of New Year's and about 3 months before that. So you really want to get in around that time. Applying can be hard because generally whenever there's a position open in managed care, you're probably fighting for every spot. There's probably 170, 180 applicants. So extremely competitive. And sometimes the only way in is really like going through a temp agency. I know like Aerotech is one company that does this, but there's done a ton of staffing agencies that try to find kind of like temporal staff for the surgeon work. And this is a great way to just get some experience. And so, that's one way in, and that's not unique to managed care. Temp agencies are a great way just to get experience and dabble in a lot of different things so that when you do pull the trigger on a career that you enjoy and want to pursue, that you'll kind of have a broad set of skills that you can demonstrate value with.
That's awesome. I never thought about using a temp agency, or I've never had experience with that before.
Yeah, temp agencies are great because they can do the job searching for you. A lot of the times they're bringing people to you, and it's also a great way to practice your networking skills because the only way you get to stay at the top of the barrel is if you stay highly engaged with your recruiter. Like if you go through a temp agency and you kind of just put your resume in there and you hope that they'll get to you one day, not really. They really need a face to a name and a relationship for it to be successful.
That makes sense. If you have managed care experience from internships and Appies, do you think it's possible to get hired right after graduation?
I would say in today's landscape, probably not, unless you did really, really well during your Appy and was able to demonstrate kind of like exemplary results. In today's managed care market, it's more of like a incestuous revolving door. The people in managed care have been in managed care forever, and they largely just jump from company to company depending on the needs of that company. So the pool of new applicants that come into managed care are largely because someone has left the workforce. Like people who, I often joke that, the people who are in managed care are the dinosaurs of managed care. They've just been in it forever. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Unless we have a huge amount of new entrants in managed care, which is like, there's a lot of regulatory and financial barriers to doing that. Because the number of positions just is very small. But making an imprint matters. A lot of people actually ask me like, "Oh, how did you start managing pharmacies right out of pharmacy school?" I actually started working for the independent pharmacy my first year of college through our co-op program, and so I worked as an intern for my boss at the time for like 4.5 years, and she was like, "Okay, I want you to run these." And so that the whole time I just demonstrated to them that I had potential, and that has been invaluable to me and my experience, at least through pharmacy school and I guess now beyond.
Well, that makes sense. We have a question. Hi, Beijing.
Hey, yeah. So you beat me to it, Alyssa. So yeah, we certainly do have a question. I'm gonna let Somia in so she can answer it. Oh, ask it. All right, Somia. I hope I'm saying your name correctly here. Hope I'm not butchering it. But welcome, and you had a really great question here. So if you want to maybe take time to ask it, and we can try and see if we can answer it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Samya. I'm currently a managed care resident right now in Massachusetts. And one of my questions was, Justin, you kind of mentioned a little bit about temp agencies. So I was just wondering, what are some of the pros and cons of using a temp agency or utilizing a recruiter, whether it's within the company that you're interested in or just a regular recruiter from the job market perspective?
Yeah. So I'll kind of give you my perspective. I think you'll get a different flavor of the answer depending on who you ask. But my idea with temp agencies is they generally have a large pool of positions to fill, and so you're more likely to get at least something if you're going through a temp agency. It might not be exactly what you wanted, but you can definitely get something. While with a recruiter, I guess it depends on what kind of recruiter. So if you're looking at an outside recruiter, it will really depend on what their portfolio of job openings looks like. You essentially you're at the mercy of what they're procuring for. For internal recruiters, that's great if you already have an idea of what company you want to work, which company you want to work for. They can go a long way for lobbying for you. But of course, that's probably the narrowest type of temp/recruiter that you'll get because they'll only be able to sell you on positions that are within that organization.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess like
Yeah.
kind of like a follow-up in terms of recruiters, if you utilize a recruiter, do you usually pay them? Just wondering because I know we're all like kind of on student loan level and
Yeah.
just wondering what's like the best way to maximize our money is at this point.
Yeah, my understanding is that most recruiters get paid based on the ultimate salary that you get hired with. So it's like usually a
Mm,
percentage of your salary that the company pays to the recruiter. So largely nothing out of your pocket, at least from the recruiters that I've had to deal with before on the hiring end. And yeah, it shouldn't be anything out of your pocket. Like they should be invested. Like the value they need to demonstrate is to the employer. Like they need to deliver high
okay.
quality candidates to them, and that's what they're paying for. So they're ultimately you're not the customer; it's actually the employer.
Oh, okay, cool. That makes sense. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, no worries, and good luck with finishing your residency.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, I don't know. I'll go back to the other questions for now. Um, so there's a question about if you have any advice transitioning from community to managed care.
Yeah. So that's the position I was in. I would say be relentless in pursuing positions. That's really all it is. Recruiting and transitioning is just as much about your own personal skill as it is as like kind of like your luck. Um, both times I've gotten a new position, I was just extremely persistent. When I was transitioning from retail and eventually got my first position in managed care, I just kept applying and applying, tweaking my cover letter, tweaking my resume to see what would fit and what wouldn't. I probably went through like 7 or 8 different revisions and actually applied to the same company twice for different positions until I landed one. And then at Devoted, my story actually is like I applied for one position and I didn't get it because they had just filled it, but I had already had somewhat of an introductory interview, and then I had like another interview and I got blown off twice, and I was just a little bit persistent. I emailed every week for 6 weeks saying like, "Hey, I'm following up with you. Can you get back to me? I really wanted to chat. I was really looking forward to learning more about the company," and so I did that. And then after 6 weeks, I was like, "They probably already filled it, so I'm not going to bother." And so I emailed them back. I was like, "Hey, I'm leaving, but thanks for the opportunity." And then they eventually were like, like we think you're great, but would you be interested in this other position, which ends up being the position that I'm in right now. And so yeah, there's like a little bit of luck there, a lot of persistence. Um, you just never really know. I think a lot of people get complacent and they get hurt by rejection, and don't. Like rejection is sometimes it's not your fault. Like sometimes the jobs that people are trying to fill, they're just looking for something very unique. When I was searching for positions, even for my company, like I had some things that I just wasn't willing to bend on. Some of that stuff was like having ambulatory care experience, having actual experience, with outcomes with members or with patients. And so, like for example, the first pharmacist that I hired, he actually ran a clinic for the Department of Defense. And so like that was the experience that I was looking for. And something else that I think that I was looking for is like I was just looking for an athlete, like someone that could really put in the work and wants to put in the work. And if you can show that, that's great. Self-development and a self-understanding can carry you so far. I actually did an exercise called Strengths Finders, which I really recommend to really help you hone in on what your strengths are. And I use that all the time in interviews and in discussions and in development. It's just a great way to articulate what is it that you're good at and how you can relate to others using your strengths. I find that a lot of people, where a lot of people struggle once they actually get their foot in the door, is actually explaining what their value is. And this book gives you some of the dictionary and the jargon, the language to help you explain to other people what your je ne sais quoi is.
Hey, Alyssa, Justin. So thank you for all those. I have a few questions myself I'd like to ask Justin.
Yeah.
So kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying about being relentless, and I really love that. But could you tell us a little bit more in terms of like a little bit more detail in terms of transitioning from retail to getting that next position? What exactly did you do? Because it seemed like you were doing a lot of cold applying, probably hundreds of jobs or so, getting a lot of rejections. What are the things that you may have tweaked, or was it just something that you just so happen to land just by pure volume of applications? So kind of
Yeah.
dive in a little bit more there.
Yeah, for sure. It was, that was a really painful time. Like for me personally, I just like, I was feeling really down in the dumps because I was constantly getting rejected. But, I think one of the things I started doing early was trying to do more wordsmithing. And this is actually really important. Like the way you write something on paper matters so much. At first I was submitting my CV, for example, which is like huge and contains a huge portfolio of my academic experience, which actually I learned, and I'm particularly learning now, is that like people don't care about that. It's just a lot of words that people skim through, and really the first 2 pages of your resume and really the first quarter of the first page is like where people's eyes go. And I actually was optimizing for that unconsciously when I was applying for jobs. I started out with like an 8-page CV, and then I ultimately ended up submitting just a 1-page resume, and that's what got me the job. And also just like my cover letter, I initially had like one of those very corporate lawyery sounding like, oh, it's a pleasure and my enthusiasm exudes for having to apply to this opportunity, like the way nobody talks. And eventually I was just like, no one's buying this BS, let me just write how I feel. And that's what I did. I was just like, no, I slave every day trying to deliver care to my patients, but it feels like nobody cares about that because nobody's willing to pay for it. And that's literally, I like put my blood, sweat, and tears into paper. And, I don't know if that got me the job or not, but I like to think that it did. And so like those little micro movements mattered, the wordsmithing, the like changing my message. Sometimes it was just like changing just even the way that I worded my job duties to better match the job description. That's also really important. Like particularly now, I get a lot of applications for my job. We don't have like a computerized way to sift through resumes. So I actually read them with my own 2 eyes. And some of them are just like so irrelevant to like the job. And I'm like, did you even read like what we're looking for? Like even if there's transferable skills, like at least try to make that painfully obvious to the person who's reading it on the other end. Sometimes we even get resumes and CVs with no description at all. It's just like pharmacist, CVS Health, and you're just like, what am I supposed to do with that? Pharmacist at CVS Health could literally mean anything because pharmacists do all kinds of things at CVS Health, from retail, managed care, innovation, claims processing, utilization management. Like, help the hiring manager out a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I have actually 3 more questions for you. So that transition. So it seemed like it was just micro movements at first, and you eventually got it. But getting to Devoted, it seemed like you were a little bit more personable, more networking a little bit. You're probably contacting maybe the hiring manager or someone over there. So who exactly were you trying to connect with in terms of getting those and relaying all those emails to, in terms of like interviews, positions, and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I actually I didn't reach anyone. Like a lot of people say that networking is what lands you the jobs, but none of the jobs that I've gotten in my career, other than my first one, were due to already having a pre-established relationship. At Devoted, I like kind of like my achievements and my values speak for itself. So I just turned in my resume and my cover letter, and I got an initial interview. And then I got a hold of someone, and that was the person I just bombarded with emails. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and maybe not bombarded. Like bombarded, maybe it sounds like annoying, but it was like a very tasteful tap on the shoulder every week.
just following up on our emails.
Just following up, yeah.
Cool. So it seems like you hire a lot of people, or just in a more of a hiring manager type of aspect. And so, could you tell us a little bit more of what you seek for in those positions, and like what are the characteristics that kind of shine out to the people that you've hired?
Yeah, maybe this is unique to me because I work at a startup. And so something that's really important to us is culture, and that really needs to come through in a very opaque way. Like if there's any inkling that we get that you would not be a great fit for Devoted, on a cultural scale, that's kind of, you're an automatic disqualification. It doesn't matter like how great you are. If we feel like you're not good for the mission, it's just not going to happen. And you know, that really pays dividends. You know, when you think about people who join companies and they're just so unhappy because of the way companies treat them, or because like you just, you know, what you do day to day doesn't feel right, that really matters. You know, if you want someone who's dedicated, if you want someone who shares the feelings that you feel, particularly in healthcare, you know, like, you know, our mission is like to treat people, our members, like we would treat our own parents and our own family. You know, like if you can't get that out of someone in a conversation, that's going to be tough. Particularly in managed care. You know, I've been in managed care enough to know that some companies just have like ruthless people. And you know, when you think about those people who are like that just deny benefits, like that's real. It happens. And so that's like the initial prerequisite. The other is just like, are people cool? I don't know if there's another way to put it. Like, do they come to your in-person meeting or your video meeting, for example, and do they smile? Do they ask you how you're doing? Does it sound like they came prepared? You know, being nervous aside, some people definitely just like walk in thinking that they have something. And I don't know if that's arrogance or if it's, you know, just lack of experience in the interview process, but you can definitely feel it in your core when things aren't right.
Yeah, and that's definitely the same feelings as myself too, in terms of making sure that we have a good connection with the interviewee, making sure they're a right cultural fit, because it's going to be someone that's going to be working with them for a very long period of time. So you want to make sure that, you know, is that other person really likable, and could I at least stand working with them, let alone, you know, developing friendships or relationships with that person. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, and optics can help too, right? Like, I often tell people, like, practice with yourself in the mirror. And I used to do this a lot. You know, before I was in pharmacy school, I was a professional dancer, and we spent hours in front of the mirror, just like trying to see how we look like to other people. We used to practice like this pained face look, like, oh, it hurts, but you know, and it really adds to the performance. But when we're talking about video in particular, and you can't get it, maybe the hands and kind of like the gesturing of the body, you know, what you do with your face really matters. Like maybe, do you talk with a flat affect? Maybe that's something you need to work on. Do you smile but not with your eyes? Like that's not very nice. And I hate to say that, like, looks matter, but it does a lot to convey a message. And so whatever you can do to help with kind of the optics of your quote unquote interview performance, the better. Like I actually have a light here that, you know, if I turn off, I just look really dark. Like this is not as engaging as, you know, having someone clearly see your face and kind of your expressions. And also just like smiling. Smiling matters so much. I interviewed a physician at one point and he literally was just like, didn't smile the whole time, and I didn't know what to do because this was someone who was going to actually see our members in person, and I was like, I don't think this is going to happen.
Awesome. Yeah, that's like really great. And so, but yeah, that's one of my tips that I got was, you know, during these interviews, if you're prepping for an interview, then record yourself and you'll see how much cringe it is. But at least you're able to point out, you know, am I looking at that person like eye to eye? Am I stuttering? Am I just utilizing too many hand movements or something like that? And then exactly the same thing that you just mentioned too. So it's good that you're, if you're able to get that interview, be able to score it and do really well. And you can try to control as many variables as much as possible, and a lot of preparation that goes with that, and also just making sure that everything runs smoothly as well. Especially right now, especially if you are, you know, looking for a position online, doing all these interviews virtually. So it's good to prep yourself that way and make sure that at least you could control the variables that are within your control. So, but thank you
Yeah.
for answering my questions, Justin. And
For
also
sure.
Alyssa.
Yeah, and also practice actually getting onto your platform. Like video chat with your friend. Don't let your first interview be your first video chat. That's like a big no-no.
That makes sense. um, could you give us maybe like 2 or 3 of your best advice for students who are interested in managed care, like what we could be doing now as second or third years, or even fourth years on Appies? Like 2 or 3 points.
2 or 3 points. Let's see. One, just know yourself. Like figure out early what your strengths are, and what you're good at, what you're passionate about, because that is what's going to drive your career decisions. And also, it'll help you drive your effort. You know, if you put in all your effort into your weaknesses, you'll be nothing but mediocre in the end. But if you put in a lot of effort into your strengths, you will always be the best. In that particular thing. So get that out of the way early, whatever it takes. You know, start with strength finders, maybe do like a disc assessment. You know, those can go a long way. With that said, you know, one thing that everyone needs to work on no matter what is communication. And so my second piece here is just like keep talking. You know, people will say network, and I think networking is somewhat valuable, but I think actually just being able to hold a conversation is more important. You know, when I first went to residency showcase and I was trying to ask questions of these residency preceptors and whatnot, like I was probably painfully awkward. I didn't know what to ask. Maybe I just didn't care enough about residency, and maybe that's why I didn't get one. But I felt so awkward. I felt like a fish out of water, and I just couldn't hold a conversation. I actually got invited on the back end to a residency preceptors kind of like it's like a party, lack of a better word, but it's like I actually got to meet them like personally, and I was like so weird. I'm sure like they were just like, this kid is not gonna make it. You know, so it doesn't really matter like how accomplished I was. I just didn't show up where it mattered. So communication so key. The more you can make other people feel like you've known them forever. The more successful you'll be. Just plain and simple. And you know, for some people that'll be extremely natural, and for others, you know, maybe you'll need some coaching. And that isn't to say that you need to be fake. Like being genuine is not what I'm tackling here. I just think that you need to be able to talk. You know, if you're gonna just be a spectator, that's all you'll be. And then third, invest in yourself. I guess this goes back into my first point, but no one cares, or maybe should care about you more than you. And so professionally, personally, take care of yourself, learn your craft, and understand what you want in life.
Those are great tips. I like the communication one. It doesn't seem like you would have ever been in that situation, seeing how you're
awkward. Yeah, yeah. I have my moments too. It's a constant area of improvement.
I'll go back to some of the other questions that we had. This one goes back to networking and tips to network, and how to land a job. Since because of the climate that we're in, you said it's harder to get a job in your position or as a managed care pharmacist now with the whole COVID situation going on. So for graduates, what would you suggest they do to set themselves apart besides contacting temp and temp agencies and recruiters? Would now be a time maybe to go back and get an MPH or an MBA? I don't know what value you would see in that from a recruiter's or a manager's standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say because, you know, people will say, like, how do I get into managed care? And there's just so many different kinds of managed care. You know, like I largely am recruiting for clinical positions. And so like the best thing you can do if you're trying to get a job, for example, on my team, is to just invest in clinical. You know, like, do you see patients? If not, then maybe you need to work on that. Like get into ambulatory care clinics, maybe be an ombudsman and volunteer taking care of the elderly or folks who need resources, like those who are dual eligible Medicare, Medicaid, or maybe Medicaid only. Those positions definitely exist, particularly in Massachusetts. You know, other things, it's hard to say. If you want to get into operations, you know, understanding of regulatory is really important. I will say that like you don't need to be a pharmacist to be in managed care. Like we hire people who don't have a PharmD to run our pharmacy operations. And that maybe is surprising to people, but yeah, definitely not a skill. We've also seen lots of pharmacists really suck at the job in managed care operations. And so that is to say, like maybe an MBA will help you develop those skills, but ultimately it will be up to the hiring manager to decide whether or not that is valuable. I've worked with plenty of MBAs who also suck at their job. And I've worked with plenty of non-MBAs who do a really great job. And again, it's really about demonstrating your value. Like, can you bring that business acumen or that level of detailed process smithing or building at the end of the day, you know, with or without an advanced degree? You know, that's all it really is. And then sometimes like experience is just experience is what's needed, and experience is what we're looking for. So you just got to build that experience. A lot of people feel stuck in retail, but there's actually so much opportunity in retail to do things, you know. And I think one thing that people fixate on is that like they don't want to do things because they're not going to get paid for it. Well, whoop-de-doo. Other people are willing to do things that they don't get paid for, and they get what they want. So you really gotta invest it. Maybe not for the company, but for yourself. Really, really important.
So would you suggest that, or do you typically see a lot of pharmacists coming out of the hospital setting, or is it more retail setting that you are hiring or that you're looking for in that type of experience?
I'm trying to think. In my last plan, we hired a lot of people from retail setting, like a lot of retail pharmacists, one new grad, a couple of new grads actually that came through temp agencies. In my position now, we have a higher bar for experience. So actually had direct patient care. Our other pharmacists had experience at a physician group. You know, that's another way to get in, is to work in quality at a physician group level, where you're kind of like ultimately still affecting the members out or the patient's outcomes. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I never thought of that, like that pathway, I guess, into it before, because I know a lot of, or there's a lot more managed care residencies nowadays, and it's something that you hear more about, but not quite the path of retail to managed care.
It's tough because, like, for example, some people are really passionate about formulary management, and I can tell you that like there's no way you're going to get a formulary management position, you know, from retail, just because there's such a jump in skill and also just knowledge. You just have to, there's so much to understand about formulary management that you just don't get exposure to in retail, and you never will, no matter how much you know, run clinics or do immunizations or maybe even teach at a university. Formulary management is kind of like a very, very special niche part of managed care. Like I don't even have direct experience in managing the formulary, even though I make all the strategic decisions about our formulary right now. And so, like, you know, that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. But that's just, you know, that's part of I guess the job. There's just a lot of things that are not entry level.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And then do you want to just take the last few minutes? I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about specifically we haven't touched on, or a little bit more about what you do in your company, or what you're working on right now, if there's any big projects.
Yeah, I would say like largely right now we're working on trying to make our partnership with our providers a little bit smoother. I think we have really strong partnerships with our providers, but you know, there's always room for improvement. And one of the things that we want to build right now is like a smoother way for us to make decisions about care that are coordinated between us, the provider, and the member. And so one of our biggest projects is like how to make that even faster than we do it today. You know, we turn around things very fast, but making it even faster, and like the goal in my mind is like within an hour is kind of how fast I want things to move. And you know, some people in managed care, that'll just like blow their minds, because you know, we're usually talking about timeframes in days, if not weeks, and we want to move in hours, and who knows, maybe eventually minutes. But yeah, so that's something that we're working on right now. Super exciting work.
Yeah. Okay. We're almost done. Maybe she let's say some last words.
Yeah, I guess the timekeeper is in. So it's been a fun, fabulous another webinar with host Alyssa, and thank you, Justin, for being an amazing guest, and David for coordinating the webinar. So I think we have our last questions in. As a call to action, I think Alyssa, you had a couple of points you wanted to make.
Oh yeah. Well,
it's your birthday?
And it is my birthday. Fair enough. Full disclosure.
I think we'll also send out like that post or that picture in an email to wrap up the webinar after we're done. But if you guys want to just take a few of your most valuable points from the webinar today and start curating a LinkedIn post, tagging Pharmacy Informatics Academy, and then Justin, me, and the speakers today. And then that would just help get the word out, help your presence on the platform, and just teach people who weren't able to make it today a little bit more about managed care or Appies, or what people can do to sell themselves better when looking for a job. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to all of us on LinkedIn. We're pretty active on there, and we'd love to connect with you guys. So